Okay, so I've been talking about the sort of the Descartes perspective on our being in the world. This really is Heidegger's, and I've got this photograph of somebody who's engaged in activity, in a skilled activity. So Heidegger's perspective is that we are always engaged. This is the normal thing, being engaged in everyday activity. Well, rather than Descartes' philosopher, who is, withdrawn from the world, almost like trying to cut himself off from everything about the world other than the fact he's thinking. Heidegger's saying, actually, our normal existence, and this is the phenomenology of his, wanting to get hold of what it's like for us in our everyday existence. He's saying philosophers are starting in the wrong place. They're starting in abstract thinking. But actually, we don't live our lives in abstract thinking. We live our lives absorbed doing stuff, like we're here today, doing this stuff. And you'll go home, you'll be in your cars or the transport, and you get home, and you'll do what you do when you get home. You see, that's everyday life. And that he says that that we learn basically to be in the world in what is tacit, pre-reflective ways. We just get into the world. When you're born, you just start doing stuff, and you're in situations, and you don't consciously think about them first. You just do them. You learn to put clothes on. You learn how to eat food. You play. All sort of 95% of what we learn and do, we do without consciously thinking about it. We just do it, and we pick it up from people who we are with. We see what our parents do. If you're
neurotypical, yes, but if you're not neurotypical,
what's neurotypical?
If you are in the autistic spectrum, your concept and understanding of yourself and the world is so very, very different. So those skills that we take for granted, which we just learn, we absorb what we're seeing around us and learn those skills. A person with autism doesn't have that, doesn't have those skills. They simply cannot see the processes of how to do a simple activity like getting dressed. It has to be the way it has to be learned. The learning process is very different to how we learn that.
Okay. Well, so is there not a bedrock though of things that even with an autistic person, of things that they just do, like getting out of bed, walking, maybe swimming, throwing stones? Would they have to be conscious? I mean, there's a sense that we've learnt probably 90% of what we're going to know about the world by the time we're about the age of 4. About our culture. We've learnt how to be in our culture. For much of it's happened before we've even started clearly thinking and taking a more sort of conscious stance on things.
Can I come back to you with
Sure.
that one? Because I would say a child with autism, infantile autism, they wouldn't be able to. They cannot, because their understanding of it's fundamental. There's a fundamental difference of the way that they, I suppose, in terms of crawling, for example. Yes, it's about those physical things, but things like being, toilet trained, or being able to do things independently.
The social things, is that primarily?
Social things, that's the and communication. Those are the areas where they are clearly unable to to learn as they move to.
So there's complexity there. If we were just to start where Heidegger starts, which is most people's normal experience. So I think with people you're talking about, they're in a different world in a way. But for most folk, our own everyday experience here, for example, which is where he's starting from, is a sense that most of what we learn in this tacit way, in our skills, in our bodies. When if you're driving, if you ask someone to explain how to drive, they'll probably have to get in and move the gears, because the learning is at that level, rather than consciously being able to write about it. And basically he's saying that is mostly how we are in the world. He calls it, got his strange terms, but he calls it ready at hand. So he talks about ready at hand. So we with this computer, I'll just come and it's ready at hand. I'll just do stuff with it. I'm absorbed in activities. I'll use the flicker. I'll point here. It's about we're in the world and we do stuff in the world, and most of it we just do without thinking about it. If I'm going out the door, I just reach out and turn the doorknob. I don't think I'm going to go and turn the doorknob now. We just do it. So he's saying that mostly we are in the world doing that. But then when things aren't going as we wish, we may need to step back, which he then calls seeing the things as present at hand, which is like, I might just be doing something with the computer, and I'm just doing it, and I'm not really concerned about the computer, really. I just want to get this thing on the screen. So I'm just doing stuff, I'm not even noticing what I'm doing, and then it doesn't work. And at that point I have to step back, and I take a more conscious, if you like, objective stance on it. And he's saying that almost like that notion of stepping back and taking a more conscious stance on it is what philosophers has taken to be the normal way, that we kind of stare at the world, But he's saying actually most of the time we're just involved in what we're doing, and that kind of knowledge is the background knowledge. He talks about background familiarity with what we do. We just do it because we've learnt it, and it's not in our consciousness. We're just doing it, and this is the territory I think we talked about last time, about that tacit knowledge, the knowledge we have in our bodies, the knowledge that we're not consciously in touch with, but is there, and in fact guides what we do. If I walk out the room and turn the door and I'm out the door, I haven't thought about that. I might be thinking about, I've got to go and check with Sue about something. So I do all that stuff skillfully, copingly, and all I'm trying to do is get to speak to Sue. And he's saying that is what we do most of the time in our lives. We act in that kind of way, rather than the reflective, consciously thinking about what we do. In fact, he'd say that most of what we do, we don't consciously think about. We just do it. And we do it in the world. So it's not just about what's going in my head. All the things I've talked about is like walking, turning the doorknob, doing this. We spend our time in the world acting with things, doing stuff with things and with people. And we don't spend most of our time thinking about it.
Yeah, sometimes I drive home from work and I'm sure there's some experiences, but I really can't remember that journey. It was about half an hour, and it just frightened me actually sometimes, because I'm then thinking, have I been in sort of some daydream,
Having just been as mindful awareness.
Yeah.
What they're telling you is be present in the moment at every
I couldn't really recall that journey in the child, well, I can recall the journey because I know it, but I couldn't recall that moment.
Can you recall what you were thinking?
Probably something's still going on for me when I left work and in the car and I just drive home and something up what I mean.
What interests me about some of the things you're saying, Jack, and I was thinking this one when I was talking about autism stuff, there's something physiological going on as well that makes us do the things that we do. And I'm sort of throwing this about, now it's kind of how much of this stuff is actually physiological and neurological, or how much of it is that kind of unknown sensing kind of something out there we're not sure of.
Look, we both want it. There's a guy, a French guy called Merleau-Ponty, who in a sense did the psychology that Heidegger never did, which is all about how we are bodily involved in all we are doing. So we have to be bodily involved. There's no doubt about that. And when we talk about Befindlichkeit and stuff, we'll get into that. And you will see that we are always in the world, how we bring ourselves in, and that is physically. But I guess the intriguing notion, this is what intrigues me, and where it connects up with all the stuff that we've been doing the last few modules, is that he's saying, yes, this stuff is tacitly in us, pre-reflectively in us. We have all this knowledge and all these skills in us, but most of them are not accessible to consciousness, or they might be if we choose to reflect. And actually, if we do reflect on some of this, then it gets in the way. If I'm playing football, and it's the inner game stuff, isn't it? If I'm playing football and we want to win, and I suddenly start thinking, what am I doing? I then get in my own way. I'm actually acting most skillfully, and I'm sure that, I think up here I'm acting most skillfully, effectively, when I'm not thinking about what I'm doing, when I'm just doing it. If I start thinking, how's it going? Am I getting it right? Then the anxiety goes whoop, and I start to trip myself up.
That's the blissful ignorance bit we're all searching for.
That's one way of putting it. But you see what he's getting at? So he is saying that what philosophers, and often what psychologists often take to be the key place, which is that kind of reflective thinking, is actually one stance we have in the world, but it's not the main agenda. The main agenda is how we are in our everyday absorbed coping, our familiarity. These are the kind of words. Our familiarity with the background, our familiarity with without even thinking about it. It's keyed into us at that pre-reflective level.
So the kind of gut instinct.
Absolutely.
Right.
We just do it.
Yes. Because I was just thinking about relating this in the coaching arena, and it's that question that I do ask a lot of people like this. I say, what's your gut instinct tell me?
Well, this is where we'll get to Befindlichkeit, which is the gut instinct. So we do register this stuff.
Jeff, you know something on the slide that says knowledge arises in human practice.
Yeah.
So action learning have a connection.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, we learn to drive by driving.
Mm-hmm.
In human. It's a big area. There's that seeing what we do as always in human practices. It's at work. It's like, what's your custom and practice? It's how we go about things here, which are actually stuff you do in the workplace. So our thinking and that is always tied into this activity in the world. And again, he's saying, whereas in the Cartesian thing, that moods, feelings are something not to trust. They cloud rationality. He's actually saying they're a form of knowing about the world. So again, it's that gut instinct stuff. So he uses his own words. So for human beings, he uses this word called Dasein, which, because he didn't want to get into the usual philosophical baggage of what words mean, because every word comes with its own meaning. So he used this word that no one else has used, Dasein, which literally means being there, or there being. So if you want to know who you are, look outwards, not inwards. Look at the customs, look at the practices. And he says that in our normal everydayness, we are socialised into the customs and practices of our culture, which is captured in one way by saying we do what one does. What do you do in this situation? Well, you do what one does. If you go into a restaurant, you do as one does. You sit there, and you use the knives and forks in a certain way. You sit in a certain way. You don't start throwing food at each other, hopefully. And he also talks about, or as they do. So he's saying that so much of the bedrock, the everydayness of how we dress as one does, there might be variations on it, but we might play around with how one does in terms, but even that becomes things like fashion. You do what one does. So he's saying that doing as one does, and this is, we'll get the tension tomorrow when we get the existential stuff, is the basic socialisation we have. And I think that, so it's, in terms of custom and practice, it's, the language we use. I read, it was, again it's on the podcast, when Dreyfus says, if you notice somebody uses language wrong, if they pronounce somebody's name wrong or use the wrong word, other people will correct them. I thought I'm not sure that's right. And then I heard it happening. I heard somebody use a name, and it said people would correct it without even thinking. They would just say, oh no, they'll either say, no, it's not that, or it's this, or they'll use the same word soon after and highlight it. It's as if we're being sort of, moved into doing things correctly.
Is that introject then? Is it just doing as one does?
Well,
stopping at red traffic lights.
You see, again, that's the psychology, that's the Gestalt notion, and there's something almost prejudicial about it. Introjects, you take something in without swallowing it out. He's saying it's not like that. This is how we are. Our nature is this. So it's not a bad thing. It's just who we are. You couldn't get by in the world without it, really. Things like the distance we stand apart from each other, for example. Each culture's got its own. You heard of the UN shuffle, where people who, some cultures used to being closer, others, you can see people backing the other one into a corner as they're both trying to find the right distance to talk to each other. And that's, we never think, we've learned that right from, our first days of being.
On that example though, if you saw two infants together, they'd be very close to each other, and connected. But then as we become adults, there is this safe.
You learn, don't you?
Space, isn't it?
And one of the things that the guy Dreyfus, who wrote that, did the podcasts, his point he's made a really strong point is that it's the background practices and the everydayness that is so complicated that you could never consciously draw the rules for it. And in the 70s, he was at MIT, and there was a massive millions of pounds project to create emotional intelligence, computer intelligence, artificial intelligence, that's it. Where they thought they could, if they just wrote the protocols of what you do in a situation, you could get computers to, copy human beings, to do everything that human beings could do. And Dreyfus said, right from the off, because he knows about Heidegger, he says, you'll never do it. You will never ever do it, because us as human beings, we've learned all the complexity of the background practices, if you like. So we know that in a lift, how far you stand apart from each other. And if more people get in, everybody shuffles around. And he knows the complexity is huge, but we just do it without thinking. So they spent millions of pounds, these folks, and actually tried to get him chucked out of the university because he was undermining their projects. But he was dead right. They never could do it.
So just making a link back to the point about introjects, what I think you're saying is that the Gestalt approach would say that we're vessels into which the introjects are thrown almost.
Yeah.
Whereas what this is saying is that they emerge within us as we grow, in a sense, that there's a different
Part of our nature, it's our cultural nature. They're not bad things. They are who we are by being part of the culture.
I suppose there's a difference between I have an essential and just thinking out loud, I'm essentially who I am, and then the culture almost kind of invades that and shapes it. That may be one picture. I suppose another picture may be that there isn't a kind of essential me that is somehow separate to the culture, but from the moment I'm born and engaging in the world, I and my culture are kind of all tied together.
That's spot on. When we get to the existential part tomorrow, we'll see that Heidegger says that he doesn't. He's got an. If human beings have an essence, it's an existential one, which is our potentiality to be.
So is there an analogy to the attachment theory with the infant and the mother? That there's no, it's not the mother and the infant. Is it a nursing pair, a nursing couple? Is it that same dynamic?
Absolutely. And I think it's a great example, because attachment theory is basically saying we don't know where it's come from, but we all have our own it's kind of way of being that feels right with other people, closeness, distance. So that's our own personal history into this. But we've got it. It's wired into us, if you like, by the time, after a few months. There's no way that we've cognitively figured this one out, that the world is such and such a place. We've just learnt it, and it's part of us.
It's just interesting, I think, just picking up that point about how we sort of develop this. Just thinking about this in terms of organisations.
Yeah.
When I used to run a big council, I used to get new starters in once a month and talk to all of them. I used to invite them in for a cup of tea and a biscuit, and we had like an hour and a half of all of that stuff. Treat people as if they were relatives and all the rest of it. And one thing I was always clear on was that when you go into a new organisation, it's that buffing up against you with this new culture.
Yeah.
And I used to say, you will pick up things about how weird things are. You'll have a sense of sort of what works and what doesn't, and what feels odd and what feels fantastic in the first few months. And then you won't learn it after that.
Absolutely.
And after 6 months, you'll be defending it to everybody else.
That's right.
Well, and I used to try and encourage the new starters to just be really mindful of this.
Yeah.
And to feedback, actually, what was fantastic and what we could learn from. And it's how quickly this stuff gets under your skin and you don't notice it after all.
That's a great example of this. And I think the thing about all the scandals that we've seen, we've got the bankers, we've got the MPs' expenses, we've got the phone hacking. For me, it's about the culture. It's about the familiar practices that become so background. This is how we do stuff here, that people have lost touch with. In other terms of other standards, this is wrong. And when the spotlight goes on, you think, how could people have done this? How could this hacking have happened? It's gross. But if you imagine it's a culture where this is how this is how you do it, then it doesn't seem odd. This is how we do it.
It's like the winter one here where the care for the care industry about poor practice and abuse. And that's something, I think that's very, very, I would put that as part of that. Because in terms of the quality of care, what's considered to be good outstanding practice, those people who were there at that point of time, there were people who knew it wasn't right. But because they were so part of that, it was institutional abuse, and that they were part of that institution, they even though those who were whistleblowers, there were one or two who said, there are concerns and this is not right. But in terms of when you're in it so deeply that it becomes the norm. But when you move the lid and come out and look inside, you see clearly that.
And people start to try and explain themselves then, and everything seems lame. How could you possibly have done this? When I was doing my MA, and I did it around. It got on to coaching cultures, about coaching, what is a coaching culture? And actually I found this Heidegger stuff so useful in terms of a way of understanding culture. And in terms of us understanding coaching, organisational culture, I think this stuff is the most useful that I've come across. Rather than thinking it of kind of explicit beliefs or rules or whatever people find, it's what we learn. It's the practices, and it just becomes what we do. It becomes the world we're in, sort of thing.
I guess we're talking about the culture, even beforehand, we're talking about culture. So that's just how it is. But I think that there are other layers going on, that there are other systems at play, trying to bring their own dynamic to it. It's not just one big, amorphous mass.
Yeah.
Not about one big amorphous mass of culture. You've got the different, the different authorities. You've got the police force. You've got the newspaper industry. And they're not all part of one big amorphous mass. They're all working within their own culture.
Yeah.
Their own cultures within their own systems.
Yeah.
I see the interrelationship between those systems is also.
Yeah. So there are, you could call them subcultures, I guess, or cultures within cultures, or cultures alongside cultures, and how then does the crossover happen?
Jeff, in terms of custom and practice, if you extend that list, could you conceivably put things like prejudice?
Completely, absolutely.
Which is, in itself is a worry, but essentially it's a belief.
It is.
So it's
a shared belief, isn't it? And prejudice mostly are located in various groupings. Yeah, groupings and that.
Is that when you start to get into the realms of not where we stand relatively to each other, but our collective or prejudices, then you get that's where you get inability to change.
That's right.
And miscomprehension and essentially, because it all comes up from the Nazi part of being what is right and wrong. I mean, you can't excuse somebody. I don't care what the reasons are. It's inexcusable. It's wrong. So in some ways, you might get that whatever right and wrong is.
Well, one person's prejudice
exactly.
is another person's ethical stance or whatever. So
It takes you into a completely different place.
At the end of the day, it's people are what one does, not what. And it's about what one does, not the between. Don't see what I say, it's see what I do.
Yeah.
So in this scale, words are as kind of proclamations and declarations about how we should do stuff are not the real thing. The real thing, we say about parents, it's not what they say, it's what they do. And kids pick up on what parents do. They may notice the difference between what they do and what they say, but it's what they do that lands.
I think, the term world, for example, we look at religion in this country and the influence the church has by, they have seats in the House of Lords, and they can politically can actually have real influence, and they can influence how laws are made. Where in France, the church has got no such power. And so their role in this country is very different than the influence they'll have in another country. So I find that quite interesting.
So we start looking at
societal norms aren't around the world norms.
So cultures within cultures, sort of thing, how they impact.
I think if I go back to that sense of family, which is what I kind of came in with this morning, and that sense of difference, and I think how I am with my family, and then take my little nieces, and and I'm just kind of like, and I'm all smiling with them and all of their behaviours because I understand, I know that where those behaviours come from. And I know that when Stuart's up there with them, I can see and I can feel his sense of kind of almost panicness. He's got his own children and they have all their behaviours and they kind of will misbehave or they're naughty. But their naughtiness, he can cope with his own children's naughtiness, but their naughtiness is just completely out of kind of kilter for him because it's not part of what is normal and what is
is, you know, their family culture. And so that little bit of naughtiness that those two girls do, I don't know, it's just like that tension for him, even though he has children, and there's that whole sort of sense of...
So the psychology here, if you like, is how we become who we are. You're starting from the outside again, really, and thinking about the culture of the family.
Yeah.
And that starts to tune us in particular ways. And if you're, you know, with a different family, I've had shared family holidays. Murder. Absolute murder. Because they do stuff differently about, you know, bedtimes and stuff like that. And it evokes such powerful feelings that people don't understand where they've come from. It's about a sense of, you know, it's like someone driving in the wrong gears. Feels like it gets you, you know. So this is the same kind of, you know what I mean?
They're just children, and they'll have a theme for you, isn't it?
It's okay.
We always seem to pick it up that there's a theme for you when you've been on some shared family family holiday.
The one I was thinking actually was a family from a different. It wasn't our family. It was a different family who we're good friends with. Were good friends with. And it was things about ice creams, you know. Well, they've already had an ice cream. Yeah. So and I have another one, you know. There was something bad about having more than one ice cream, you know, stuff, and you get it at a visceral level.
The sort of things that I was meaning, yeah.
So this is the territory we're in.
Can we help you with this?
No, we just get rid of them, get rid of the friends. So again, we're just saying what we're saying really, that the cultural practices, I've written them as generative in that sense that they create our identity. They enter out, they make us, they are a part of who we are, they're not bad things. And when we get into Heidegger, you say whatever you do, even in your existential notions, you have to do it in the world. And actually in the world, you learn all sorts of stuff. Well, to start with, you become, you know, my identity as a father, as a kind of a teacher, I'm British. These are all part of my identity. And I'd love to say more about this, but I think I'll just briefly flag up that Heidegger says you can't get behind. He talks about being thrown into the world. We've landed. It's not of our choice. And he says you can't get behind your thrones. I can't get behind who I am. I can never bottom it. So in terms of being a male or a father and a male, that's who I am. And I can never get behind that because it goes bigger than me. You know, being a man has got a cultural history. It's got gender issues, you know, between men and women. But I am part of them, and I can never get behind them because they're bigger than me, but they live in me. So diversity training, for example, it isn't enough that I get rid of my prejudice. I ain't going to do it because I'm still a man and I'm still part of it. So I can't get behind that. I have to live it. I have to, you know, live the hand that I'm dealt.
I think that's... So I was just thinking about change again. Change is such a fundamental issue for organisations or any structures in the world as well. I mean, and it just seems to me that the ability to change people's behaviours culturally, prejudices, and therefore the way that we act, laws, so on and so forth, they've lasted, you know, for centuries and centuries. In other words, we almost haven't changed at all. What's changed is technology and our ability to do things differently, the tools, the instruments. But actually, fundamentally, who we are hasn't changed one jot.
He would say that you have to change the cultural practices.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm...
Not individual. It's not about me getting rid of my prejudice, because that's not enough. That's the Cartesian, that's the individualistic thing. Because I mean, I've done loads of this kind of diversity training, and I'm still terrified of saying the wrong thing. I live with that. I hate doing that stuff because I enter into it in the sense I'm going to be a failure. At the end of the day, I'm still a man.
And change is so fundamentally different.
Yeah, that's right.
If you apply, if you believe this to be true.
So that's, you know, when feminists and that have said, have tried to change political landscape, that's what's needed to actually change the political, the actual practices.
Absolutely.
Is how it's no good starting with the individual and their own prejudices. It won't do it. It's not, because I'm more than that. I'm a father, and all that's in that. He's also saying that, so my identity and what I am good at and who I am comes through these practices. So me being a teacher here, I love doing this stuff. I'm good at it, and I've learned. So my identity is here, but it's only by doing it. It's not an abstract thing. An artist learns to be an artist in the world by learning about paint and learning about perspective and learning. It's generative. It creates identity. So who I am is absolutely rooted in what I'm doing, and they're absolutely rooted in cultural practices, rather than some internal sense of self-actualization, a me that's looking to find its way out, so to speak. And culture is often seen in that perspective as what gets in the way. It's like all these bad norms and that are stopping me being who I am. But he's saying, actually, to find out who you are, you can only do it in the world.
Just looking at what gets in the way, so you're frightened of saying the wrong word. So does that mean that then, in a way, you're behaving differently?
I'll come right to that point. I just want to restate it though. Most of this learning is pre-reflective, it's tacit, it's learning by engaged, absorbed involvement, being alongside people who are doing it, developing background familiarity with the practices. And the important thing for coaching is, amongst all the stuff, is so we have to help people raise their awareness of these background practices, this tacit knowing. And actually just to talk to their beliefs about it is not going to get it. And also you need to be paying attention to, well, what are the background practices? How do you do it here? And some of it will be about learning to skillfully do. If it's leadership, how do you skillfully engage in the background practices that aren't abstract things? So it shifts. When I said it kind of, it's not that and that, it's kind of here. It shifts my thinking into the involvement and the betweenness of me and the world I'm in.
So the rub there is, if somebody says looking to improve their leadership, or somebody's looking to improve their driving skills, is that the innate stuff is pre-reflectively learned, or it's held tacitly, and so people may not know what they're doing or how good they're being.
Yeah.
And I think that I have a notion that the more people are in the zone or in the flow, or whatever word you want to use, the less they're able to say what it is that they're doing.
Yeah.
I think often people who are in that place are the people who are most critical of their own skills, and are the people who are least able to accept positive feedback when it's offered. It's as if it's just
what you do.
It's just like what you do. It's just like almost like there's a vacuum there, or there's just like there's a space where it happens, but you can't get at it.
So in coaching, and someone's trying to get it's about, as much as it's about skill development. It's what we do, isn't it? It's like, so what is it you need? Where are you at with this? Where do you need to do? And it's about not just talking about it in that session. It's about, well, go away and learn the skills, try it out. And it's almost like, so that's the go away and doing it. I'm seeing coaching as almost that present at hand moment where we step back. It's the what do we call it? Reflective practice. It's reflective practice. You practice, you get in there, do it, and then you come back and into the coaching. And so how did that go? What have you learned from it? So that's where we start trying to get it up here. But as just the one part of a movement to going back in and doing it again. And so we as coaches are trying to raise awareness of, well, what happens? Because most of it happening here, you see, at a tacit level. Let's raise that awareness. Let's get and raise awareness of the cultural practices in the organisation. How do they do it here? What is expected of you? And okay, well, and what skills do you need? go and try it, you know. And you will have done this, won't you, about helping somebody go back into a situation and try something out, which is the tacit learning. It's just getting involved. And in terms of what I'm calling the disciplinary, so there's a generative side. The disciplinary side, if you like, of social practices, is where everybody wants you to get it right. And I feel like I need to get it right. So there's strong pressures to conform to these practices. I said about pronouncing words wrong. And I think we experience these pressures in the world about getting it right. So that there's laws, there's regulatory frameworks, but again, I think most of it's the inner game stuff. It's about my sense, for example, is often, you know, when we're small, we're around parents, for example. I'm one of them who have got real anxiety that our kids are going to do it right. Don't show us up. Make us proud of you. And it's almost like our children and us, when we live in that anxiety of getting it right. And does anyone know the inner game stuff? Have you come across the inner game stuff? For me, I want to write a paper on this. I'd like to reformulate that whole stuff about self one and self two. Because you remember in the frame you've got self one as a natural, creative, pre-social entity, which again is the Cartesian stuff, that's creative, and if you just let it get on with life, it'll learn and it'll be fantastic. And then you've got this self too, which is really the culture, which is always giving it this, getting in the way, and it makes us anxious and stops us. Well, my sense is that we do learn by involved engagement, but as soon as there's an anxiety, and so I'm going to check this out for you, I think it's to do with the publicness often of stuff. As soon as we're concerned about being in a public situation where we may get it wrong, then concerns about getting it wrong, which can be experienced as shame, embarrassment, anxiety, starts to flood the system. And then I take a step back and I start to self-monitor. I start to get in my own way. It was great doing the degree ceremony, going up on stage. And I could notice myself a real anxiety about getting up on stage. I'm walking across the stage and I'm walking up. I thought, this is barking. I walk this amount of distance all day. I mean, walk loads to get to the bloody stage. I'm not concerned about that. It was about getting up and walking across the stage. And I might trip. You know, I might make a mistake. Did you have this?
Well, it's interesting because as you're talking, I'm thinking about a course that I did, which was videoed presentations, 2 days, which sounds a hell of a lot. But what was so fantastic about it was that you were able to stand back at that time and review your own presentation, how you reviewed in the world, and concentrated on the positive. So going up on that stage for me, I remembered what I'd learned.
Brilliant.
Because it is all about standing up and entering into yourself.
Yeah.
And I felt bloody brilliant, and that's the first time I ever felt. Because I, like you, I'm always like, ooh. Before that, like, do I really want to do this? Maybe stage fright, maybe, I don't know what it is. It's different for everybody. But no, I was enjoying myself that day.
So what I'm taking from that is, unlike the thing about the inner game, as Galway has it, I think we can learn to self-manage ourselves. We can learn the skills so that we can go and do stuff.
I'm just wondering, Jeff, because on that walking on the stage with a lady at the side, and as you got up those 3 little steps, she said, you know, had been sat there and watching what 300 people do it, she said, walk on the stage and shake the person's hand. What am I going to do?
What do you expect?
You know, you used. You know, so some instruction was given, even though I've observed it about 300 times, so I suppose there is, you know, something.
So I think this is such interesting stuff around anxiety, where it comes from, and so I think it is about the public cultural nature of making us do it right. And so, and it saturates us, doesn't it? All the judgments, am I going to get it right? And then thinking, well, I'm not going to bother about, I'm going to try and do it differently. But we have the tacit capability to do stuff, and we can do it damn well. You know, I'm sure if I was driving and I had a driving instructor in my car, you know, I wouldn't be just doing it like I do it. I'd start one, am I doing the gears right? Am I, you know, have I got the indicator, I look in the mirror? All that stuff would then start to flood, and the anxiety would flood with it.
I think there's great stories here about similarities around sport. I mean,
Arsenal supporter.
You certainly find out with sportsmen is that quite often coaches are family members early on, and you normally find that sports people excel when those family members disappear. Which I always find interesting. And I know for a fact our best friend in the village, he's got two boys, one of which is particularly good cricketer, and he's just sort of, he's only 12, he's just about breaking through into Staffordshire, into the county, and he hasn't quite made it this season. Really, really close, not quite made it. And when he goes out and plays at representative level or school level, his father keeps telling me that he says, look, Sam he gets so frustrated because he feels so disappointed. But Ian was telling me he's disappointed, and the question is, what's he disappointed for? And it's actually not personally disappointed, he's disappointing his father. And he doesn't quite get that. So it's a continuous circle that's going on here, that until such time as they separate those two things, I think young Sam will always be chasing something that may never be realised.
And of course, part of the circle for me, I've gone and watched my boy play cricket, and my anxiety, I just want to go away, I just can't bear it, you know. So if you see it as a circle of anxiety,
and that's exactly what do you think? That's the point I'm making.
Yeah,
that they're carrying that on out onto the field, which in a game of sports stuff clearly inhibits what they do.
So I think I really think this is right. This has got something about the way the customs and the practices are there, how we are, it is both part of us, but the desire to hold us in doing what one does, it is also the stuff that is at the root of so much of the sort of anxiety.
Yeah, just before we move on, it's on the clock this one, I don't want to
Right.
be like that, I'm interested in the other slides, but the bit of the sort of discussion we had just at the earlier slide, about what does that mean for us in terms of our coaching practice.
Yeah.
That's absolutely just struck a chord with me. I really hope that at some point we can come back. You know, that we talked about leadership.
Yeah.
And we talked about that issue about it's not just what people are thinking about this, but it's actually grounded in practice.
Yeah.
And therefore, what can we do as coaches about that? Well, I suppose what I'm saying is, can we clock that at some point during the day? It would be really good to spend a little bit of time there.
Okay, so remind me that. There's one of the books up there, that the podcast with Dreyfus, the line he takes with Heidegger is all about skilled coping, absorbed practices, being absorbed in practices. And so the book up there is from him, or in honour of him, is something like, it's called it's about skilled practices. So this was a really surprising bit for me, because in terms of philosophy it's so abstract, isn't it? But in terms of rubber hitting the road as a coach, it's all about really helping people engage in the practices, but helping them raise their awareness of it, and working at that level rather than the usual kind of level about it.
It seems as if raising their awareness of the different forces that might be impacting upon them at the system and subsystem levels is, to me, finishes that sentence, because it comes down to, you can coach somebody to the blue in the face about being a better cricketer, but unless the dynamic you mentioned about the relationship with the father is there, it won't go away.
And also,
it'll never be good enough either.
And so the skills bit, is important, but also we're talking about this other part about the anxiety and about how to help somebody like you were helped, how to help them manage that anxiety as a kind of a skilled thing. It feels weird talking about this in terms of skills, but I find it quite useful because it's quite concrete, isn't it? So when you're up on stage and you're about to do that presentation and the anxiety is there, because how public can you get? It's almost like it's a focus for anxiety. Well, how do you manage that then? Not as a distraction, but as a way of helping you. Because if you can do it, if you can get up there and you can, work it and not get tripped up by yourself, then you'll learn how to do it. And next time around, or a few times around, you won't need to have all these self-management stuff because it'll become part of your tacit knowing.
So just staying with that and staying with what Jill said, if you're coaching from a Heidegger zone, what's the coaching intervention or coaching question where somebody's presenting with anxieties about, because I'm trying to relate it to the skill, but I'm wondering what the question or intervention would be for me as a good coach to be in that Heidegger zone and then ask that question.
Well, it will be raising anxiety about that. And can you just hop, when we get to Befindlichkeit in a minute, I think that will be the place.
Do you mean raising awareness about that?
Yeah, what did I say?
Raising anxiety.
Sorry. Well spotted.
And I was also thinking that actually what would be also useful to do, and maybe we'll have to think about this, is as a Gestalt coach, what would I be saying, and what as a Heidegger, so there's something quite interesting about the different things. Because I was certainly thinking as a Gestalt person, I'll be going into talking about parent and and sort of stuff. Anyway, but we'll come back to that.
Okay. So hold these questions. So it is about raising awareness, because just to preempt it a bit, there will be the notion that anxiety, there will be knowledge in that. It will be speaking about that person's being in the situation. So we'll come to that in a moment.
Can I make one quick? It feels an example of going up from the graduation and walking the steps and walking that long sort of 5 feet. That there's the individual's anxiety. It feels as if there's also a collective anxiety. And also, you imagine if somebody did trip, there'd be a collective. So you're trying your own anxiety and also the anxiety of the other people.
When a speaker starts to stumble and as if they've lost, you can feel it, everyone goes, you can feel it in the room, can't you?
But then there's also a situation where the individual might not carry that anxiety, but the audience might carry the anxiety. Give an example, I went to Wimbledon and I sat there and was watching this match and the audience, we were so incredibly anxious because we could see how things were coming out. We could see that the player wasn't anxious, but the player eventually became aware of the anxiety of the centre court. And obviously, I think that's when I thought, are we making him, are we helping him, are we hindering him winning this game? Because the vibes that we were bringing into that situation, it was, you could touch it, because we were all sitting right at the end of edge of our sheet, of the chairs. And I think that was quite an interesting one.
And I bet a lot of his...
Is it the audience or...
I bet a lot of his coaching has been about how to manage the anxiety.
Well, look at the King's Speech.
Yeah? Yeah. Let's get to this notion of Befindlichkeit, because I think this, as I've done this, and it's been really useful trying to do this, prepare this, because it's come back, and it's come back, and it's come back as a centerpiece for so much of... So Heidegger says he's exploring moods, as I said, about not as a private event, but as an attunement to the world. So I like what he says here. It's always cryptic, but so a mood is not itself an inner condition which then reaches forth in some enigmatic way and puts its mark on things and persons. So it's not like I'm upset, so I just project that and I see the world that way, but the world isn't actually that way at all. It's just me. He says it comes neither from outside nor inside, but arises out of being in the world as a way of being, as a way of such being. So I just, some of the time I love his language, and sometimes, so it's like, what's it about? Well, I think what he's talking about is, Befindlichkeit is a word he almost made up out of the German language, because he's trying to get hold of something that people don't normally speak about. And literally translated, it means, how do you find yourself? Or, how are you? Or how are you doing? And when you ask somebody how they're doing, you're asking, aren't you, how are you? You know, emotionally really. But also, how's it going in life? How's life going for you? It gets both of those, I think, that expression. How are you doing? And this is what he is trying to grasp hold of here about moods and feelings, that they are both in us, but they are also saying something about the world we're in. So he says, Befindlichkeit, which is that, if we stick with moods, a mood always already has its own understanding. In other words, we find ourselves in moods. We haven't got a choice about it. You can check this phenomenologically for yourself. Moods, they're there, aren't they? I could be happy, I could be sad. I've often said moods like weather, you know. I can't grasp hold of them and just change them. They're there. And we may not be paying attention to them, but they are there. And he's saying that, in a sense, it's the moods contain an understanding of what the situation is. Because we're beings in the world, it's somehow we're picking up something. We're, in the sense of being attuned, we are picking up something about the world we're in. He says it's not only that. Our mood captures, because it's about how we bring ourselves into the world. I haven't really got hold of that bit yet, but a lot of Heidegger is about, so there's a situation, there's a circumstance, but the key question for coaching is, and how am I bringing myself into that? And he says, Befindlichkeit captures what is important, what matters to me. So in that mood, it might be I come in here and it's like when we do the opening round. If we just pay attention to what is happening for us. So I sat here and I gave quite a bit of stuff about just attending to my mood, about the excitement, the anxiety, and what matters to me. So what mattered to me today was giving this session well. And the anxiety, that mood, it was in there, it was part of it. So the mood captures the complexity of the situated self, me in a situation. And it's felt, and it also captures that sense of what matters to me here. So it's complex. But I check it out for myself. I think, that's right actually, I think that's right.
What I'm noticing is, I've never seen you up on your feet so much. And quite animated. There's something different about this that you're doing.
Right.
Because
it matters to me.
different about you, so.
It matters to me. And so he's saying it's the whole mood. So my whole mood is different here. The mood isn't just expressed as a kind of it's in my body, it's in the manner of my speech, it's my engagement with it. But I can feel it as a sort of a rush, a bit of a rush. So that's my mood. What do you make of this?
I mean, this is a sort of personal example, but I do go and have my eyebrows threaded on a regular basis. And I chose to go for this procedure at a time when my mood was particularly low. And it was so bloody painful. And it was like it was the first time I had it. And yet I've been going for months and months and it's not at all painful normally. But when I was just thinking about what you'd said there, and that's, I was presenting that day in a bit of a low space. And it almost exaggerated that painful, that experience into something very painful. And I don't know whether that is
well, I think
what
it does.
we're talking about, but that's what that meant to me just then. it resonated. It was like,
Yeah.
don't go and do that again. You know, try and recognise that mood and what impact that might have on things that happen to you or
So the mood is catching. It's something about how we are in the world we're in, but also how we are then bringing ourselves in, and it pushes back into the world, doesn't it? So you're saying then it felt like a painful experience. So, and that's a real experience, you know. Somebody going. So I find it so much more interesting. The notions of feelings are just private events that you've got to be suspicious of. It's actually saying for coaching, and it's what we've been talking about. That felt sense, if I can use that word from another place, it's knowledge. It's knowledge of where we are, it's knowledge of how we are in it. And as coaching, for coaching, that is a really important place to be paying attention to and to be raising awareness of. Let's try something. Let's do a bit different from this. What I'd like you to do is maybe get into pairs, and there'll be three, is just spend a bit of time with each other, one person coaching another, and see if you can help the other connect with the mood they're in now, and what it's saying, what that mood is saying to you about being here in terms of the circumstances and how you are in it.
And can I ask a question?
Mm.
Is there anything different we might be doing to catch a kind of spell?
Befindigkeit.
Say it again?
Befindigkeit.
Befindigkeit. Then we wouldn't be using Gendlin focusing.
But it's very, you see,
Yeah.
if you notice that paper I sent was Gendlin on Befindigkeit. He has found a philosophical home, if you like, for his ideas. We've got, if you wanted to get this, you'd be kind of, working into that tacit stuff. So you could do it by asking kind of awareness-raising questions. You could also do it in terms of some of the stuff we've been doing. We've got some, if you wanted some drawing stuff there, you can do the body stuff if you want. So there's not a lot of time for this, but I just thought it'd be good to shift it and make it real. Maybe just do it up till lunch, and then we'll go and have lunch, and then we'll sort of debrief after. So 20 minutes, maybe if you go into a 3, you won't all get a chance. I mean, 10 minutes each. Help the person get hold of the mood, your mood now. Raise awareness and what's in there.